First, because this issue is on the ballot this year.
Right. You said about here, I did want to paint a class to the public.
Good night.
Good night. Hello?
Hi, hi, hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
It's Charles Dees from Lincoln Terrace Tennis Association.
Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
All right, it's a little after 6:15, but we don't have a quorum yet, so we're going to give it another 2 or 3 minutes, and then we'll start the meeting off around 6:20 or so. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Those of us who are joining can make sure we're on mute. That would be fantastic.
How do you mute?
You, sir, are calling in by phone, right?
Yes.
There is a keystroke. Does anyone recall how to do that by phone?
Is it *6 or something like that?
Yes,
That
it's
sounds
six.
right.
Mm-hmm.
I'll do that right now.
Thank you, Mr. Dietz. And we have a quorum. Thank you for everyone for being so punctual. I'll still give it another minute just to let the room fill up. But not that we have anything to vote on tonight, but it's still good to know we have a quorum. This is the part of an in-person meeting where we'd all be chatting amongst ourselves and checking in and saying, how have you been? Nice to see you. How's the family and all of that. So just imagine that's going on. Think nice thoughts about that. We'll be back together someday soon. So I've got one eye on the list of participants here. So thanks everyone for coming in. I see a lot of committee members and I see a lot of people who aren't committee members, which is a wonderful mix for the EST committee. Thank you all for joining. To just briefly take the roll so we can do this officially, and then we'll launch into the agenda. So as I call your name, if you're a member of the committee, I will call your name. Please unmute, say here or present or whatever you choose to say. I will say thank you if I hear you, and I will move on to the next name. If you don't hear me, I didn't hear you. So to begin, Desmond Atkins.
Present.
Thank you. Julia Boyd. John Buckholtz. Janet Collins. Alan Gerber.
Here.
Thank you. Karen Gray.
Here.
Thank you. Saskia Hagens.
Present.
Thank you. Igenie Harris Blenman.
Present.
Thank you. Ms. Jordan J. Jordan. I apologize. I don't remember your first name.
Jennifer. Here.
Jennifer. Thank you. Mr. Zima Jordan.
Here.
Thank you. Regina Kinsey. Peter Crashus.
Here.
Thank you. Francis Langley.
Yeah.
Thank you. William Meehan.
Here.
Thank you. Fior Ortiz Joyner.
Present.
Thank you. Celeste Stern.
Here.
Thank you. Carrie Tan.
Here.
Thank you. Mark Thurton.
We do a roll call. Listen.
Thank you. Ethel Tyus. Yrsa Weatherspoon. Robert Witherwax here. Deborah Young.
Here.
Thank you. We have 16 of our 21 members in good standings. That's an excellent turnout.
Mr.
Thank you.
Witherwax, Kimberly Watson here.
Ms. Watson, thank you. You're not on my roster, but I'll mark you present.
Thank you.
So I am Robert Witherwax. I'm the chair of the Environment, Sanitation, Transportation Committee. I'm joined by my colleague, Mark Thurton, who is the co-chair of the committee. Mr. Thurton, good evening. We have two DOT-related items on the agenda. We're going to hear an update on the Eastern Parkway Signalization Project. We're going to hear a presentation on the City Bike Expansion Project. And then we're going to move into some committee business. We're going to discuss preliminarily what we're going to do in May relevant to determining our goals for the next 4 year. And then we're going to hear subcommittee reports as they may or may not come in. So let me just ask our friends from DOT who is here and who is speaking on what topic. I see lots of DOT on the board tonight.
Mr. Witherwax?
Yes, Mr. Thurton.
I invited the 77 precinct in on reference to the Eastern Parkway concern because that was a major concern in the public safety and in the sector D for our 77th precinct. And I wanted for them to be aware of what's going on so that when they have their sector meetings, that they can express to the community what's being done to provide for their safety in that hazardous area. Thank you.
I see Officer Wallen and P.O. Sharabi here with us, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. My name is Officer Sharabi. The commanding officer, Deputy Inspector Tony Brown, asked me to join the meeting. I'm the highway safety officer for the 7th precinct. We're very well aware of what's going on in the Parkway. When it is time to discuss that, I just want to bring up a few concerns that we had that we brought up in the past. I'll let the DOT go first, and then we'll take it from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Officer Sharabi. Who from DOT for Eastern Parkway?
Hi, I'm Tara Ishii with the pedestrian unit at DOT, and I'm here joined with David Chong, who will be doing the presentation.
Great, thank you, welcome.
Hand it over to David.
Yeah. Hi there. So glad to see the MIPD here with us tonight because yes, we did go on a walkthrough with them a year or two ago, and they expressed their concern, and we heard them loud and clear, and that's why we're here. So to get started, let me just start sharing my screen.
You're using your earpiece?
All right, let me just say, if you are calling in on a phone, we can hear you. Your number ends in 08. Please press *6 to mute.
Let me see if I could connect them to your phone. I'm gonna disconnect
David, I
them from mine.
apologize for the interruption. I don't have the power to mute people as host, but hopefully people will realize they're being heard and can mute themselves. *6 if you're calling in on a phone, please.
Okay, but hopefully I can speak loud and clear and that you can hear me enough.
Great, thank you.
All right, so just to introduce myself again, can you guys all see my presentation? Okay. So yeah, just to introduce myself again, I'm David Chong. I'm an engineer for the pedestrian unit at New York City Department of Transportation. And we're here today to discuss an update to an ongoing project along Eastern Parkway with an additional proposal on Buffalo Avenue. And after the presentation, I'll gladly take any questions. So before we move on to the proposal design, I want to just cover some background because there's been a lot going on here. As a reminder, this is part of an ongoing project to signalize all the service roads along Eastern Parkway. So far, we're 3 phases in to our construction. 8 out of the 14 intersections have had their service roads signalized. And signalizing these service roads has allowed us to install the crosswalk across the north medians. And you can see in the photo here to the left at Bedford Avenue, you can see that pedestrians were crossing regardless of whether a crosswalk was there or not. And after the signalization in 2018, we were able to add the crosswalk and the pedestrian signals throughout the whole intersection. And this year, we're planning to do this upgrade at Rochester Avenue and Buffalo Avenue to the east side. Now, I want to focus on the intersection of Buffalo Avenue specifically. It's a very busy intersection, as you all know, between all different modes. For vehicles, it's a major connector between Eastern Parkway and Rockaway Parkway. For bikes, Eastern Parkway is a heavily used bike path, and it also leads to multiple connections. For pedestrians, it's next to Lincoln Terrace Park. It's next to a handful of bus stops and the Utica Avenue subway station. And Eastern Parkway is also a Vision Zero corridor. Now, looking along Buffalo Avenue between Eastern Parkway and Rockaway Parkway, there are currently conventional bike lanes here that were installed in 2010. And along East New York Avenue, there's a handful of schools, and Rockaway Parkway, which connects to, is also a Vision Zero corridor. Now, the reason why we're taking another look at this, like I mentioned before, is due to a concern brought to us by NYPD about the amount of crashes here. And if you look at the chart, they were absolutely right to be concerned. Along with the total crashes, there's been 1 pedestrian severe injury and 6 motor vehicle severe injuries, including 1 fatality that resulted from a speeding motorcycle losing control. We also analyzed that 75% of these pedestrian injuries were the result of a turning vehicle. Next, in order to prevent more crashes, we analyzed the nature of the roadway, and we identified some key issues that I want to go over with you.
That's all, thank you.
Firstly, as with many of the intersections along Eastern Parkway, there are a lot of crosswalks that are uncontrolled. And if you look closely at the photo of the southernmost crosswalk over here, and you can see that the crosswalk doesn't have a pedestrian signal, and that these peds did not know that the traffic along Buffalo Avenue was moving while they were attempting to cross. The crosswalk between the northern medians is also missing, like we saw in the photo previously at Bedford Avenue. Next, at the crosswalk to the west, there is a lot of traffic that has to yield to the pedestrian, as in the photo, which makes it very uncomfortable for someone to cross. Going northbound along Buffalo Avenue, there's a double left-hand turn, which really complicates things. So from the perspective of these drivers that are making this turn, they have to account for a lot of things that are in their way. First off, they have the car next to them that's also making the turn. Second, they have the car going the opposite direction. And last but most importantly, the pedestrian crossing the street. And this is the major cause of the crashes here. Now looking at this turn as it approaches Eastern Parkway on Buffalo Avenue, the middle lane is currently designated for both the left turn and the cars going straight. And when these two high traffic movements have to share a lane, they end up getting in each other's way. Then at the rightmost lane, which is designated for the right turn, you can see in the photo that it's practically empty and it's very underused. And so there's a bit of inefficiency going on here. Next, looking alongside Buffalo Avenue.
Can I add one thing on that previous picture?
Yes, okay.
If we go back to the previous picture, if you notice on the northbound lanes, we did a lot of looking at this because we heavily concentrate in that area, but we found it very difficult when the DOT did a little renovation at that intersection. On the northbound lanes, you see where you have the red box, there's a stop line, a black stop line that you have running across there. That used to be in the main body of the intersection between the pedestrian crosswalk before it hit East. Yeah. Now what happens when you guys move that over, any car that gets stuck between that stop line and that intersection, meaning before Eastern Parkway, and they can make it through the red light, we cannot issue them a red light summons because they're after the stop line, and we'll lose it in court. And we've seen it time and time again, so we don't write the summons anymore over there like that. That stop line is an integral part of that red light violation, which in most times occurs once that red light hits, they make it through, and then the Eastern Parkway traffic begins, and they're already through, and we cannot stop those violators because they're technically after the stop line, and we will lose that in court. That was one thing that I wanted to point out. And then before you start getting onto Eastern Parkway, those left turn lanes on the northbound side again, they're governed by a red arrow and a green arrow. Now, what we want to see changed over there is it jumps from green to red, and we want an amber yellow in the yellow arrow, amber. What that does is it gives the motorist a little bit of time, a warning to know that, hey, listen, it's about to turn red. Maybe don't complete the turn. Don't get in there. And then on the service lane, if you point the arrow a little to the left on the eastbound service lane, you have a little black box over there, that's governed by a stop sign, which creates a very, very bad situation when vehicles are traveling eastbound in that service lane. They get into that square over there between the northbound, southbound traffic, and you have, if you see on Eastern Parkway, you have a right-hand turn from eastbound Eastern Parkway onto southbound Buffalo, and you have the northbound traffic, and you have the southbound traffic, and that's only governed by a stop sign. And like you mentioned, there's no pedestrian cross signal over there. So that's a few added things in that specific area that you were talking about that I just wanted to bring to the attention of the DOT.
Yeah, very well noted. Later in the presentation, I'll address it a little further.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, continuing on to Buffalo Avenue. There's currently conventional bike lanes that puts the bicycles very close to moving vehicles. This road is also very wide, being 60 feet wide, and this creates a sense of a faster road despite it being the standard 25 miles per hour speed limit. Lastly, looking south towards where Buffalo meets East New York Avenue and Rockaway Parkway, the majority of cars and bikes here follow the curve of the road to continue to Rockaway Parkway. However, any car wanting to make a southbound right onto East New York has to go to the right of the split, which is very straight, and bikes are in the direct path of this. This creates a very difficult yielding point because this is a crisscross movement, and sadly, this was the cause of a recent bike crash here. So now that we've covered the issues in this area, I wanted to discuss what we can do to fix them. This project will be constructed through our in-house program by DOT staff. It includes the following options in our in-house toolkit, which are crosswalks, traffic signals, pedestrian signals, lane designation markings, protected bike lanes, quick curb, which are these vertical white barriers, and painted curb extensions. Next. So firstly, the rightmost lane would be changed from a right turn only lane to a straight and right turn lane. So we previously saw how little the right turn lane was used, and how the left turn and the straight vehicles were in each other's path. So by moving the straight vehicles to the right, it better distributes the traffic waiting at the signal so that they can better and more efficiently clear it. I also add one more thing to address your question about the stop bar. Wait, let me go through the next slide first, and then I think I'll give you a better picture of what's going on. So another thing we're doing is the double northbound left turn will have its own phase that's separate from any conflicts. This means that the pedestrians walking along the west crosswalk will have a separate phase from these double turns. And I previously mentioned how many obstacles a driver making the northbound left has to watch out for. So with this configuration, they only have to watch out for the car next to them. And one more thing I want to add to answer your question about them passing the stop bar, this black line here, and getting stuck in the middle of the intersection. It's not mentioned in the presentation, but in the signal timing, there will be a second or two delay for them to clear out before the east and west starts, or the other phase starts. So it gives them time to just clear the intersection, get out the way. Nobody else is moving just yet. And that, hopefully that would solve the issue of cars sitting in the middle of the intersection while the other cars have the green light.
is there a way that the stop bar could be possibly moved upwards a little bit, meaning closer to the intersection, to give that plus that delay plus if it's moved up a little bit further north, then we can begin to target red light violators in that area, because as it stands right now, it's just a possibility. This is feedback that I'm getting from the officers that are doing enforcement in that area. We have to follow, the guidelines that, that the VTL states in terms of when a motorist can be issued a red light violation. And what we wind up having is we wind up having to let all of them go on that because of that stop line. It's a little bit of a sore,
Officer Sharabi, I hear you. I hear you. Let's let Mr. Chung finish the presentation, and we'll come back to that. That's an excellent point.
Yeah, it's
Sure.
an excellent point, and yeah, we'll definitely consider that.
I'll just jump in to say that we will take a look at it. I do want to clarify that we can't have a stop bar in the middle of the intersection, just because then cars would be blocking the through movement east-west or east. But we can look at getting it as far north as possible within, the southern leg of the intersection.
Is there much stacking on the northbound of Buffalo? I mean, do we ever have moments where it's congested all the way back to Rockaway or East New York?
Yeah, there's during rush hour time, which is where we see the most collisions occur, both in the morning and in the evening. It'll get very stacked up. And I personally witnessed a collision just last week, 2 weeks ago on my way home. I take that service lane and make the right onto Buffalo. And there was a vehicle that was right in front of me, and it was traveling straight ahead towards Ralph on that service lane. And then the light changed for the northbound lanes, and they collided into each other, airbags deployed and everything. So, I mean, it's a very tough intersection. I get it.
Let's keep rolling. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely considered.
Sorry.
Right.
I will also add, and David, you can certainly say more to this, but with having the double left turn without the through movement mixed in with that lane, that those northbound left turning vehicles will clear out much quicker than they do today. So hopefully that also addresses the issue.
Yeah, we're hoping that the exclusive phase that we give them will allow them to clear out of the intersection, so we don't see what you saw when you were going home. Also to add, these service roads, when they get signalized, these service roads won't be stop signs anymore.
Okay, that's great. And it's also just the thing that I mentioned before with adding the amber arrow phase.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, is the two northbounds going to have an amber phase too in all this? Is that under timing?
It's called what we call protected only. So there will be no permissive phase where they have to yield to other cars or pedestrians. When they have the solid green arrow, as you see on the road, they have the right of way.
So I see the stop bar is positioned behind a bike box. Is the intention that the cyclists in the bike box would also be turning left onto the Eastern Parkway bike path with that phase? Like, I don't really know, or like, I don't see how that would work as a cyclist versus, like, even I'd probably make a two-phase right turn and turn right and then go straight with the line. So does the bike box need to be there?
Do we have our bike unit with us today?
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear
you. So the idea here is that depending on when you show up as a cyclist, you could either do a two-stage turn or you could get in, use the bike box to get in front. So if you showed up during a green phase for Buffalo Avenue, you would just continue up to the crosswalk in that little corner and pull over and wait. And we call it a two-stage crossing. So you would pull up and wait for the Eastern Parkway phase and then continue west on Eastern Parkway. But if you showed up during a red signal phase, then it would take a really long time to do that. You'd have to wait for the green phase just to pull across the street and then wait and again for the green phase on Eastern Parkway to pull across. So the idea with the bike box is that if you show up during the red phase and all the northbound cars are stopped, you can pull into the bike box and position yourself in a way so that when it does turn green for Buffalo Avenue, you can continue straight without having any turn conflicts. And David, correct me if I'm wrong, but the turn phase would be lagging. So if you pull into that bike box and wait for the green light, the initial green light is going to be the vehicular through, but not the left turn. The left turn will be held until after the pedestrian phase, during which bikes get onto Eastern Parkway, and then the protected turn would happen.
That's right. Okay. I hope that answered your question. Thank you, Nick. So yeah, we're going to signalize the service roads. We're going to install pedestrian signals throughout the intersection that were previously missing. You can see in the yellow arrows where they were missing, and the new crosswalk across the northern medians. Sorry, it's freezing up on me a little. I think I skipped one. Okay.
There we go.
All right. Now looking at the block stretch of Buffalo Avenue leading up to Eastern Parkway, the bike lane will be moved from alongside the traveling cars to between the curb and the parked cars. And by doing this, there's better separation between the two modes, and this would not reduce any moving space for either of them. And lastly, in the southernmost section towards Rockaway Parkway, we will install vertical barriers called quick curb, you can see in the photo here, to slow down vehicles heading towards the southbound right lane. Placing these barriers here will require vehicles to slow down and navigate around them. And this creates a better environment for cars to see the bikes and yield to them as they as bikes head towards Rockaway Parkway. And we will also install a painted curb extension on the northeast corner of the intersection with East New York to shorten the crosswalk.
Will that have quick curb around it too? Is that what I'm seeing there?
Yes. No, not quick curb, sorry. That would be flexible delineators. It's the skinnier version of that.
Yeah, the little slats.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so in summary, the double left turn conflict for pedestrians will be removed. The lane markings will be more efficient through reconfiguration. Service roads and all crosswalks will be signalized. The crosswalk between the north malls will be added. The conventional bike lane to park will be upgraded to parking protected lanes. Will increase yielding to bicyclists at the southbound turning approach, and will install the painted pedestrian island to the south. And the benefits are that it will reduce a lot of vehicle conflicts with pedestrians and bicyclists. It completes the pedestrian network. It creates shorter and safer pedestrian crossings, safer bicycle routes, and it clarifies a lot of traffic movements. So, yep, that's the end of my presentation, and I'll answer any remaining questions.
Great, David, thank you so much. That was a great presentation. I hope it was clear. There was a lot of, I hope you can read the chat, because there was a lot of good constructive feedback in the chat from people who live around here and who I think are giving it a couple thumbs up. There was one question in the chat. Will you include any overhead signage indicating the flow responsibilities, especially I think on the northbound flow of Buffalo Avenue as you're getting up there? maybe a hanger over the roadway to say, look, here's the demarcations. Is that something that's likely to be included?
Excuse me,
Especially since you're
Rob.
going uphill.
Excuse me, Rob. Rob.
Yes, Mr. Atkins, was that your question?
Yeah, that's my question. But and that going uphill there on Buffalo is one of the prime areas, but it basically is the indicator for the major thing that people don't like is the fact that they consider it too much confusion, and it destroys the scenicness of the area. But if all it takes is one driver who's not familiar with that intersection, whether they're from out of town or they don't drive in this section, if you have the usual signage on the ground and you're approaching, sometimes the traffic is too close to have any thought what you're going approaching and what you're responsible to do. And it's not always easy for people to change lanes if they find out that they are in the wrong lane. That is another cause of accident. Why can there be more
So to your
overhead
question,
signage?
is there an opportunity for any overhead signage here?
We'll have to consult with our sign unit, but usually there is for these type of intersections a sign that goes on the side of the road with the lane designations. The left two lanes would say left, and the rightmost lane would say through and right.
Mr. Hong?
Yes.
It's been more than 25 years. I was in California on business, and I was on the freeway. And then I noticed that there was tremendous signage alerting you about lane changes, but particularly when exits were cut up. Turn Bloomberg finally instituted it on Eastern Parkway. And I said, gee, look at how this is finally changing. I've lived in this community more than 70 years. And when the demographics changed, then the care of the roadways got better. What I'm asking for is to have because as it's been pointed out by everyone, this was as far as landscaping, this was a beautifully done area. But as far as the change in vehicular traffic, this is a nightmare. Accident waiting to happen. Hey, people need as much help as they can get.
Thank you, Mr. Atkins. Officer Sharabi.
Yeah, I totally agree. The more signage that's at that location will alert motorists to proper conduct at that intersection. I was reading through the chat, and I just want to address one question that Ms. Watson asked over there about the dollar vans on the commuter vans on Eastern Parkway and Utica Avenue. I know it's a different intersection, but she did ask over there. We have been doing joint enforcement with the 7-1 precinct since that is the border between us and them. We did at least 6 of them in the last 2 months. Chief Royster, who's the chief of transportation for the NYPD, is aware of that. We just did one about a week and a half ago. We hand out literature. It's a combination. We did a 2-day enforcement over there, which one day was enforcement and one day was education. So we kind of like to be even-handed with that. We're just not interested in just giving everybody summonses, but we also want to educate them on what's going on. And at that time, we try to talk to the commuter van operators and try to clear them off of that intersection. We do the best that we could do with with what the situation calls for in regards to that. But we are aware, and we are addressing that issue along with the 7-1 precinct, so that we're both sharing that intersection. So we want to be on the same page.
Thank you, Mr. Shrabi.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Mr. Meehan had a question.
Yes. So I have questions about why certain actions are not planned at the 2 intersections for full protection of the bike lanes. Given that intersections are where the most conflicts happen, I can see that there's some parking space. I'm just that right turn heading north on Buffalo Avenue, I can just see drivers hugging the curb there, you know, crashing into cyclists. And why was the decision not made to, you know, reallocate maybe it looks like what 4 or 5 spaces to prevent future crashes at that location? And then if you can go down to the slip lane, what exactly is the angle at which, you know, the next slide? What exactly is the minimal angle that someone could go from like very right inside the quick curb to just outside that concrete barrier? Because that seems like still a pretty low angle of incidence. And so I'm concerned that we're just going to see another crash in that location.
We did consult with our bike unit about this. Nick, could you possibly answer this one?
Well, I don't know what the angle of it is, but I know that drivers will have to slow down a lot more. You know, the normal thing in an intersection, when a car turns from one street to another, they have to slow down a lot, right, to make a, say, a 90-degree turn. And that's why it's generally, in certain instances, okay for turns to be permitted across, say, an active crosswalk or an active bike lane. But in this instance, the existing condition is that to turn right or to stay right at the fork, you don't have to slow down at all. You pretty much go straight. And I think from a cyclist point of view, you know, you think that you're not changing streets, you're not turning left. And it's that ambiguity that's the whole issue. So I think the way we solve it here is 2 pieces. One is that we harden the turn so that southbound drivers who want to turn right onto East New York Avenue, for one, have to turn at least a little bit. The other thing is that by clearing a little bit of space there, we improve the visibility. So cyclists have a chance to see the drivers and drivers have a chance to see the cyclists. It's still not a fully normalized intersection. You know, drivers in this position, they don't have to make a really sharp turn. But I think this was sort of a good balance, you know, between some of the interests we have here. There's a lot of traffic coming through. I know parking is sensitive in the neighborhood, but we wanted to try to find a way to balance some of these things. And we think this will make a huge help.
Well, so I was wondering, given the whole streets plan, why the decision was not made to move that right turn fully to the intersection with New York Avenue and turning that into a pedestrian plaza. And like, what exactly is the turn radius there? Because it still looks like a pretty wide radius.
Yeah, do you have car counts on how many, you know, and bike counts on how widely that slip lane is used? I mean, is that something that is sort of vestigial?
We do have vehicular data here, and that's something we could pursue if you guys are interested. I mean, it's another little sort of analysis task for us to see like how many of those, if those right turn vehicles stay east of the triangle, what that traffic impact would be, what it would look like. What we would do with some of that space. You know, we'd have to think about, like, for example, what would like the parking loss be on that little slip lane, but certainly not impossible. So if that's something you guys are interested in, and David, I hope I'm not speaking for you guys, but you know, if that's something you guys are interested in, you could include that potentially, you know, in any kind of resolution. But that's something that you guys want us to investigate.
Thank you. Ms. Gray had a question in the chat about, will there be signs for driver caution as there is a park? Of course, you're driving right through Lincoln Terrace Park and tennis courts, playgrounds, you know, and all the schools around. So is there a program in all of this to include sort of general caution signs that essentially you're driving through a park?
Historically, I'm not familiar with any of those signs, but I can definitely consult with our signage unit about that, see what they can do to alert drivers about that.
I'm asking because, you know, when you're coming up from East New York Avenue, coming down Rockaway, you're coming towards East New York Avenue, you're coming up that hill towards Eastern Parkway. It's kind of, people tend to come fly around that little corner there. And with the tennis courts on one side and the park on the other side where the kids are, sometimes coming up that hill, they need to slow down there.
Maybe there's room for a speed bump over there, right where that bend is.
Something. Yes, something you have to do there, because I just see it because I used to go play tennis there early in the morning, so I see what happens. And if you go like on a Saturday in the middle of the day, especially when the weather is warm and the kids are out there and people are coming to play their little games, you see what's coming up the hill.
Yeah. Well, one thing that's not obvious, when we move the parked cars closer to the travel lane, we're creating a narrower sense of the road. So that does tend to slow down vehicles. But yes, we can look into more ways of doing that.
Can I just butt in here too? This is Charles East, and I'm the president of Lincoln Terrace Tennis Association. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. So I agree with her because the cars or the vehicles coming up Buffalo Avenue from Rockaway Parkways, sometimes they cannot negotiate the corner, and that's what's causing the accident. The other thing that I would like DOT to address is the passageway from Rochester, you know, that passageway where they play the netball, and it comes across to where the tennis courts are. It's like a shortcut to the subway. Do you know where I'm talking?
You're talking
Not quite.
Rochester Avenue. Yeah, we don't have slides
Yeah.
for that tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
right
there's
the
a
great box.
passageway. A lot of people, especially during the summer, it's very, very you know, the traffic is extremely heavy. As a matter of fact, when we have our tennis program, and it's going to start on May 14th. So what we normally do, we have to buy those stop signs, and for the kids to cross the street to go to the restroom, we have to go nearer to East New York Avenue, and about say 4 or 5 car lengths from the crossing to Eastern Parkway, and then literally block the traffic so that the kids can cross to go to the restroom. So I was wondering if anything can be done in where this DOT is concerned to address that issue.
Well, Mr. Dietz, you're getting a lot of thumbs up in the chat. A lot of people like this idea about sort of a mid-block, you know, halfway up the hill, maybe President Street aligned signalization, either on, would you want it on Rochester or both Rochester and Buffalo? I mean, maybe that's another thing we can throw back to DOT on this.
Yeah, but definitely on Buffalo, you know, that passageway that comes across from Rochester. Is there any way we could put a traffic light, you know, but it's gonna be on green, and if we want to cross, we would press the you know, like a button so that it can turn red so we can cross, because it's very, very dangerous. You can literally stay out there and see accident happen when the park is full.
Yeah.
Yeah. That wasn't investigated as part of this project scope, but you know, that's something that we can definitely look into. We look into new traffic signals all the time, and if you were to send a request for that, it wouldn't be part of this project, but it could possibly be a start of something new.
Every little bit helps.
The other thing too, years ago, about 5-6 years ago, the precinct normally has a booth, you know, in right in front of where they play the netball. That hasn't been there for about 5-6 years now, and you know, that also helped to cut down crime in the area. So I don't know if the precinct can do something about that too.
I can bring it up. I could bring that up with my commanding officer and go through the proper channels if something like that could be placed there again. You know, obviously depending on the department's ability to do something like that.
Officer Sharabi, you're with the 77th?
Yes.
And is Lincoln Terrace in the 77th?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, this is a part of CB8 that most people don't realize is CB8, especially that we even touch East New York Avenue. So thank you for bringing this intersection to us. It's not something that is in, you know, our usual purview. But
yeah, what he was saying is in particular, it's a particular problem because what happens is it's after the bend. So if you're traveling northbound on Buffalo, the southbound doesn't really have an issue because you have a very long stretch of straight road and you could see the pedestrians trying to cross that area. But if you're traveling northbound and you're coming from Rockaway and and it turns into Buffalo and you're making that bend up north, you only have a very limited time where you can see those pedestrians crossing over from one side of the park to the other.
What can be done for you to slow the traffic before they approach Buffalo Avenue? Can something be done to that? Like a traffic signal says slow down or something? Because people just come flying around, and that's what's causing the accident. They cannot negotiate the corner.
Yeah, is there any change as part of this, David, to the signal timing at East New York and Buffalo? Or that's
That was outside the scope, sadly.
okay. So that's for another day. I hope you guys are getting some good feedback on another day. Projects for another day.
This is definitely good feedback. Like David said, we might not be able to incorporate it into this particular project, but it's really great to hear this. And you know, we could even have a walkthrough with the Tenants Association to really see it and understand it better. I also would say that it would be very helpful for us to know when you think the peak hour that people would be crossing there would be. Is it during the summer? Is it during the school year? Is it you know, a certain time of day, the weekend, the weekday? Because that makes
mostly during the summer. Mostly during the summers and weekend. Mostly on weekends too.
Okay, summer and weekends.
When kids are out of school, they use the park. A lot of people use the park. And we have programs every Saturday from the middle of May to the end of August, and on a Saturday. And we work with the precinct to have you know, police protection, at least their presence, to request their presence over there.
Yeah, this is the Tennis Association, not Tenants Association. I've heard both tonight. Tennis as in the game.
Oh,
Tennis Association.
Thank you.
Yeah. And also, one other thing, we need some illumination with the lights at the back of the tennis court between the fence and the
Mr. Dietz, I'm going to have to stop you there. That's a different committee.
Oh, that's all right. Okay.
I can definitely refer you to our Parks Committee. They would love to hear about that project.
Yes. Yes. So I'll be working with Mr. I will be working with Mr. Thurman on this. He and I will work together. And Community Board 8. So we will be working together to get some resolve on these issues.
Well, in the interest of time, I'm going to move this conversation along because we have another presentation and then a few more.
Just before we go, though, Mr. Ridderax, last night at the Public Safety Committee meeting, a number of things were brought up which will affect the DOT, which the DOT has to partake of. The blocked streets, the closed streets, are causing a ripple effect of heavy traffic on Washington Avenue, people are complaining about Franklin Avenue because of the block Underhill. Nobody can come down Underhill at certain times. And so people are seeing the issue popping up on Franklin. People are seeing it popping up on Washington. We had a parent who showed up last night and was talking about Washington. These things need to be looked into. So I'm mentioning it because this is the EST committee.
Thank you, Ms. Gray. That is certainly something we will discuss later on in the meeting. Because we have these specific project-related presentations, I do just want to save that, but thank you for bringing it up in front of the DOT reps. Tara, Ms. Ishii, is there anything you need from us tonight?
I have a question.
Let me hear Ms. Ishii's answer, and then I'll return to you. Sorry, Mr. Atkins, one moment.
No, this is, I mean, the improvements at the intersection are really an update to just inform you that this is coming. As Nick Carey said earlier, if you want to ask for additional things, you know, it would be helpful for us to receive that so that we know what you're looking for. Other than that, and also
Can we have a copy of this presentation?
We will be posting it tomorrow online, and we'll certainly let you know when that's up and available.
Then we will add it to our agenda for May to get you any comments, criticisms of the committee. We don't like to vote on things the same night we see them, which I hope is a reasonable stance. But we'll think on it, and we'll get you some comments by the end of May.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Atkins, I think was, I see Mr. Thurton's hand.
Yes, Mr. Witherwax, you referenced me.
Yeah, didn't you try to ask a question a moment ago?
No, I didn't. What had happened was
that was me
misheard.
that wanted to ask a question. This is Mark Thurton.
Mr. Thurton, sorry.
With that presentation, that page 17, could you put that back on?
Just give me 1 second.
I've been asking for this for years, for this intersection to be addressed. And I think that in this, where you guys are putting in that bike lane, that dedicated bike lane, they're going to have a serious problem with the kids, because now they had an area when they was crossing the street from Buffalo to that area, from the tennis courts to the other side. It's not supposed to be done, but this whole area was totally unsafe, even Eastern Parkway or East New York. But what's going to happen is that people's going to be trying to cross this street, going from the tennis court over to the park. Now that the bike lane is protected, the pedestrians are now going to be having to stand in between the cars, and the only thing that they're going to be seeing is oncoming traffic. This is the northbound traffic. So, and when they cross the street, they don't see these cars coming up that hill. It's very important. It's extremely important that you guys put a crosswalk, as Mr. East said, with a signal light at that section for the safety of the pedestrians. With that, it doesn't always have to be green. I mean, it doesn't have to be turning on and off, but when the pedestrians push the button, it'll give them an opportunity for the light to turn green for them to cross. This is extremely important for that community. And page 16, could you go on to 16? I want to take a look at that. Is this telling me with the yellow arrows, these are the pedestrian crossings? How about the one going east and west, where they don't have a yellow line? Is that a crossing over there?
Yes, that is a crossing. Where the yellow is where we're adding pedestrian signals where they don't exist now.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and what are you doing for this north and northeast crossing of Eastern Parkway for the pedestrians? That's where the real concern is, on the western side of that section.
Right here?
No, right, the big intersection. Come on down.
Oh, right here.
Yes.
Yeah. So that is signalized right now. So we would be removing the double left turn conflict that they have. So there's a lot of left turn traffic that comes here. They don't have to account for that anymore because they'll have the red light as they're crossing.
Okay. All right. Also, is there any way that you can put like a yield to pedestrian sign over there? Because once you get that double yellow, that double turn signal, it's telling everybody it's a green light go, and the pedestrians are on their own crossing that street, and that's a major concern. Signaling, I mean, the signage is good, but also put a signage yield to pedestrians, because I've seen several pedestrians getting sideswiped on that area over there. Yeah. And that is a major concern over there. Are you guys going to be looking at Rochester Avenue also, please?
With Rochester Avenue, we presented in the past about this, but it includes adding the pedestrian signals all over the intersection, and pretty much this configuration with the crosswalks, signalizing the service roads so that they're no longer stop signs. And with your question about yielding to pedestrians, the crosswalk and the double left northbound turn, they will be on different times. So there should be no pedestrian that on that crosswalk while that left turn is moving.
Okay. And how long this project's going to take to be completed?
So we're aiming for this summer. It's probably going to take a couple months. And we're still seeing where the timeline is, how it's being developed.
And do you have an update on the timeline for the other aspects of the signalization along Eastern Parkway? How is that project progressing?
Okay, so we've done 8 out of 14. This year we're doing 2 more, which are Rochester and Buffalo. And then in the following couple of years, we're aiming to do a few per year, and hopefully we'll finish in 2 or 3 years.
I know you guys aren't operations, but this is our #1 priority as a board, and we've asked for this project to be done years ago. It has been delayed and delayed and delayed. And anything we can do to get it done in its entirety within the fiscal year is something we as a committee and as a board would support. That's unacceptable that it's going to go on a couple more years for something as basic as this along this major Vision Zero artery. So I agree with the comment that 2 or 3 years is a ridiculous time to waste for something so critical. And with that, I thank the members of DOT for their time tonight. Like I said, this committee will review the presentation and we'll try to get you some comments and criticisms in a written resolution form after our May meeting. But thank you for your good work. I think there's a lot to like in this. All right, thank you. Who here is from the City Bike?
Hello, I'm Sam Hope. I'm here from the Bike Share and Shared Mobility Unit, along with my colleague Lisa Moresco. We're going to present about the City Bike expansion into Community Board 8.
Great, Sam, Lisa, thank you for coming. Do you have ability to share the presentation, or there you go.
All right. I think everyone can see it. Please let me know if you can't. All right, I'll just dive right in. And thanks again for allowing us to present at today's meeting. We'll be presenting the draft plan for the City Bike expansion into Community Board 8. And in the first half of this presentation, we'll have an overview of bike share and our planning process. And then in the second half, we'll take a look at the draft plan map with the stations proposed for Community Board 8, and then open it up for questions at the end. So let's start with an overview of bike share. What is bike share? Bike share is a sustainable mode of transportation that is made up of a dense network of shared bicycles. It helps increase mobility around the neighborhood, giving people more options on how to get around and connect to other modes of transportation. The system is available 24/7 and operates and provides all the benefits of having a bike in the city without having to worry about storage or maintenance. There are a variety of membership options, from annual to casual 1 to 3 day passes, as well as single rides. What is City Bike? City Bike is New York City's bike share system. It operates under a public-private partnership between DOT and Lyft. It is a station-based system, so you have to retrieve and return bikes to stations. And these stations are placed either in the roadbed or on the sidewalk. And they are not hardwired to the ground. They are solar-powered and completely wireless. To give you some background on City Bike, it has been operating for over 8 years. The phase 1 in the light blue was the original service area that launched with 330 stations and 6,000 bikes in 2013. The phase 2 area, we doubled the size of the original service area, expanding further into Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Queens. And we are currently in the phase 3 of expansion, which, when it is complete, will have doubled this phase 1 and 2 service areas again by filling out Manhattan, expanding further into Brooklyn and Queens, and into the Bronx for the first time. Let's take a look at ridership. City Bike has been very successful and seen lots of growth in its members and rides per day since its launch. There are about 100,000 daily trips during peak riding months, and we have about 160,000 annual members. So we see that bike share is a mode of transportation that New Yorkers use and want. So the city is looking to support that demand. Here we have a breakdown of the membership options. There's a single ride, which is just $4 for one point-to-point trip. Day pass options include unlimited rides for either 1 or 3 days. But the most popular option is the annual membership, which is $185 for a year of unlimited rides. And there are also reduced fare memberships for NYCHA residents and SNAP recipients, which are just $5 a month for unlimited rides with no annual commitment. So users would only pay for the months that they wish to use City Bike. And Community Development Credit Union members are also eligible for a $5 a month membership. City Bike participates in several community partnerships and programs, including some community grants, which are given to community-based organizations for engagement with low-income or minority populations. For instance, City Bikes gives out partner keys to community organizations for expanded programming and education. When it comes to safety, DOT promotes cycling safety with helmet fittings, light and bell giveaways, and commercial cyclist workshops. And the 2019 Green Wave Plan focuses on improving bicycling infrastructure and the bike share expansion areas. So let's take a look at our planning process, which is laid out in these 4 steps. Station siting. The station density is at the core of City Bike's success to providing a reliable and consistent network of bikes for users.
Can you just go back one slide? I'm sorry to interrupt.
Sure. This one?
We're at step 3, right?
Exactly.
Thank you. Just going forward. Please proceed.
All right. Yeah, station density. So we want to provide people access to bikes at both the beginning and end of their trip. So we want to make sure that when someone is in the service area, they're generally a 3 to 5 minute walk away from a station. And to achieve this density, we have a grid that shows an approximate 3 to 5 minute walk. We try to place 1 station per grid to keep this consistency. And then to deal with differences in demand, we adjust the size of the stations so that larger ones are at major destinations like transit hubs. And when choosing areas where stations can be placed, we consider many things like distance to hydrants and utilities, ADA guidelines, and pedestrian clearances on sidewalks. For public outreach, DOT conducted in-person outreach with our street ambassadors team and via our interactive feedback portal, which was promoted on DOT's social platforms, shared with electeds and the community board, as well as a variety of local stakeholders. Participants were able to nominate locations for consideration or note areas where a station might not be suitable, and this feedback guided the site selection process. Phase or draft plan creation, where we are now. After we identify all of the available space where a station might go, we overlay that with the community feedback as well as lift operational concerns. And then we take out any of the less preferred sites and use the remaining ones to select our draft plan map. And we'll get to that draft plan in just a few slides. But first, our next steps after this presentation will be to gather feedback on the draft plan. We'll then do a technical screening of the sites and then release our final plan online and do site-specific outreach and notify the buildings of adjacent properties where the stations will be placed. And then the stations will be installed and we will continue to do outreach and monitor the stations and make adjustments if necessary. So let's take a look at the draft plan. Here's an overview of the entire map, and then we'll go through some more zoomed in sections of the map so we can get a look at individual stations. And just to note that this map is also available online at nyc.gov/bikeshare. We have 3 zoomed in maps to go through. So we'll take a brief look at all of them, and then we can circle back to any of the maps that you want to take a closer look at. Here is our first zoomed in map. And the stations are represented by these orange icons here. These square icons are stations in the red bed. And then we'll see some triangle icons. Those are stations on the sidewalk. The letter in each icon is the cardinal direction of the street where it's located. So for instance, like this right here is a station in the roadbed on the east side of Brooklyn Avenue. So I'll leave this for just a moment more, and we'll move to the next one. Like I said, we can circle back to any of these that you want to take another look at. Here's our second map. This one is the area between Atlantic Avenue and Park Place. And here's our last map showing between Park Place and Eastern Parkway. So there's our draft plan. We're happy to take any questions now. Go back to any of these maps to take a closer look.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Lauren. I'll start off with one obvious question that hit me. Why do you not have any stations located close to either the Utica Avenue subway or the Nostrand Avenue subway stations? Like the closest one to Utica is at least a block away on Troy, or a block and a half away around the corner by Lincoln Terrace, or 2 blocks up on Utica. And if you go 2 slides prior, Nostrand Avenue didn't even make your map because it's hidden behind the key at the bottom left.
Oh, that's a bad placement.
But you don't have any stations near that station either.
Well, Lisa knows this the station placement more than I do, but I would say I think there might be stations closer, but they would be located just south of the border in Community Board 9. So Community Board 8, I guess these would be the closest ones, yeah. But it is a goal of ours to get them as close to the subway stops as we can. So Lisa,
yeah, we will be presenting 9 in a few months' time, and that will get closer to some of those stations. But more generally, like along Eastern Parkway and those side streets can be a little complicated with street widths, bus stops, etc. So it has to be a technically viable location, but we do have some peppered along Eastern Parkway.
Lisa, I called you Lauren a moment ago. Apologies. Thank you. That's a good answer. Second question is, what is the ultimate install date if all of these go off all right? When do you anticipate bringing this phase live?
We hope to start station installs in the late summer or early fall.
And the install is pretty quick. You put it in, you turn it on, and away we go, right?
That's right, yeah.
Okay. All right, I'm going to turn it over to the membership. I just want to let people know, and I apologize if there were some issues with the last presentation. I can only see the slideshow and a few talking heads, so if you're raising your hand very politely, I'm not likely to see you. Put your comment in the chat. I'm monitoring that a little more avidly. But please don't just, unmute and blurt. So looking at the chat, does anyone have any questions relative to the city bike? So Ms. Ferris asked who determines the placements of the city bikes. I think that presentation answered that. It's a very iterative process with lots of technical concerns as well as lots of community concerns.
All right.
I see Mr. Meehan, I'm happy to see most of these in the roadbed. Sidewalks are busy and narrow, which is true. Ms. Ferris is not happy there in the roadbeds because that takes away parking. Ms. Joyner has a question.
I forgot where it was.
Joyner?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Witherwax. Unlike Mr. Meehan, what determines whether the city bike is on the roadbed or the sidewalk? Because I see that on New York Avenue between St. Mark's and Bergen, there is going to be one on the roadbed, and going towards the eastern side of the district, we have more density because we have larger pre-war buildings. And like Ms. Farris said, we already have issues with parking as it is.
That's a good question. And there are many things that go into where we can place stations. But sidewalks are mostly pedestrian clearances, fire hydrants, utilities, things like that. So I'm sure, you know.
And not to mention at the corner of Bergen and New York, there is a bus stop as well that takes away parking from that side of the street.
That's true. We cannot install in front of bus stops, so that also prevents us where we can put stations.
But density cuts both ways, right? The more people, the more likely city bike riders there are too. Mr. Meehan, will you be implementing CB8 and CB9 at the same time? Is the rollout phase going to be the same?
CB9 will be just after 8. So, you know, exactly. We'll fill out all of 8 and work down into 9. We try to keep it a consecutive system.
Okay. Mr. Atkins has a request to speak.
Your statement. The city bike station there by the Brooklyn Children's Museum, it was brought to my attention that going south along Brooklyn Avenue, there already is a stretch of no parking. It's only authorized for people who have EVs, electric vehicles, to come and park there to charge. So you're basically taking away parking spaces. You're already making a technological imposition that is beyond a lot of the people in this community's demographic finances. I just find this to be offering some people something that they didn't really ask for. And I know this has been the plan through Sadiq Khan and the Mayor Bloomberg.
And what I would say is like the designated EV parking won't be impacted. It's closer to St. Mark's where that's located. So that will be just south of like the EV parking. But what I would say is we anticipate high demand for the Brooklyn Children's Museum as well as Brower Park for this area.
Yeah, I think having 2 stations adjacent to Brower Park is a great idea. And the same thing for the density around St. John's Rec Center. Mr. Meehan also has another question.
Yeah, I was wondering, I live further west, kind of where there's already City Bike. And I noticed that kind of at the top of the hill, usually it's very easy to find an e-bike, but down at the bottom of the hill, it's very difficult to find one. And so I was wondering what additional rebalancing, I'm not sure if one of you is from Lyft or if you're both from DOT, but what additional rebalancing resources there will be and like what the proportion of e-bikes will be to kind of make sure that there's like good availability, say for people with mobility issues trying to get up the hill.
That's my fault. I'm the one who bikes the e-bikes up the hill all the time.
Yes. We're both from DOT, and yeah, the rebalancing is an issue. We see it everywhere, especially at tops of hills and things like that, where people don't want to ride the classic bikes up there. Lyft Motivate, the company that operates City Bike, is in charge of rebalancing stations. And as far as the electric vehicle or electric bikes go, it's a 20% of the fleet can be electric bikes.
Wow, really?
So is there, could we perhaps resolve to, write to City Council to try and lift that limit?
So we work with Lyft on negotiating that percentage of the fleet. So sort of in the works and will be part of another like contract amendment. So that is not something we'd see in like the phase 3 plan.
I think to Mr. Meehan's point, that's a bigger conversation that maybe we can have afterwards, because I think that's a great point of leverage that the community board might have with its local council person when we're talking about our district needs and things like that. So we will table that one for the moment. There are some other questions in the chat. Ms. Joyner, You had another question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Weatherwax. And to your point, I understand that density goes both ways, but I'm just trying to better understand as to why, if there is a city bike share on Brooklyn Avenue on the east side, on one side of Broward Park, and then on the west side on Kingston Avenue on the other side of Broward Park, why would one be needed on St. Mark's and New York?
Well, that gets back to our question, or thank you. Our whole thing about density, we try and keep the same density of stations throughout the entire service area, so people have bikes where they are and where they want to go. So that's pretty consistent with our density across all of the service area in the city.
Okay, and just one more thing, and I understand, but I just feel like there are a lot of comments and statements in the chat of people who are concerned with parking spaces, and my concern is that there isn't a balance, that people who talk about the lack of parking spaces in their communities aren't being heard. I think that we're willing to compromise, but it seems like there is no area to compromise as far as because people are not going to get rid of their cars. Where are people going to put their cars?
We definitely hear the concerns about parking take. And we try to balance that. We try to do an even split because people are also concerned about pedestrian clearances. And sidewalks are incredibly hard to find spaces to put city bike stations. They're just pedestrian clearances and, like I keep mentioning, the utilities and things. So we try to take sidewalk stations where we can. I know this map, it's all roadbed, but we try to take them where we can, and where we have to put in park or roadbed sites, we do. But we try to balance between the needs of everyone.
Look, I could also make 2 points, one about economics and one about ecology, right? Most New Yorkers don't have cars. Cars are expensive. I could be reading Carrie's post right now, right? Cars are a luxury item. They may be a necessity for people who work and use them to drive, but that's something we should as a society be trying to move away from, right? So enhancing items like City Bike and diversifying the ability of people to move around their community, I think is a net good for everybody, even if it means it might be a little harder for somebody to find a spot on a particular time at a particular day. These are things we need to do to keep our society healthy economically as well as ecologically, right? This is the greener choice.
Very well said. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for our presenters?
I have my hand up.
I'm sorry, I don't see the hands. Who is that?
Deborah Young.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Please proceed.
Okay, I want to ask a question. I saw that there's a bike station proposed for Sterling Place. It looks like the west side of Sterling and New York, and then another one, and I don't remember whether it was on the west or the east side of Sterling at Nostrand. And I want to have an understanding about why it's proposed so close and in those two areas. That's one question I have.
For a lot of those that you see along those, like the biking infrastructure, those are directly related to feedback and where we heard folks wanting stations along certain corridors. And in this particular instance, it's sort of a function of, proximity from one another. As you can see, it's a pretty tight network. And we try to have things evenly spaced. So it's not like exclusive to Sterling Street, right? So we still have two along Broward Park. But what I'd say is we really try to, supplement the existing infrastructure and where folks are actually riding.
And I'll add one thing to that, which is that these are also flexible and fungible, right? If a certain dock isn't being used or is causing a problem, it can be picked up and moved somewhere else.
Well, it seems that St. John's Place would have been better because it's a wider street. St. John's and New York, it's a wider street. There's more space, and it seems like it would have been more palatable to put one there and then the other one on Nostrand Avenue in Sterling. But it's
we can take a second look at St. John and Nostrand if you'd like.
Well, St. John's and Sterling preferably. And there's a bus stop there as well. So
that's one of our you guys may not be aware of this, but that's one of our problem corridors because of the way the bus moves and the way the the streets are. So yeah, if you
Not
could,
on
I
the
agree
east
with Ms.
side,
Young.
Bob.
I think,
Not
I'm
on,
sorry, Ms.
not
Young?
on the east side of St. John's. That's the
Yeah, I'm
water
with you.
side. That's
Yeah.
the water side. The other thing I wanted to piggyback on what was said, and you know, I'm pro bike. You know, I have no problem with that. But I also don't feel that there is a balance and there is any equity and consideration given to people who desire to have cars or need cars. Elderly people, people who are handicapped, are not riding bikes. And it seems like that as we roll out between, you know, the city bikes and everything else, that it is just, we're being disrespected and not paying attention to. And there is no balance. And it's unfair.
We definitely hear your concerns about parking.
Excuse me. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't hear what you said.
I was saying, we hear your concerns about parking for sure. We can take another look in this area to see if there are sidewalk options, but we usually do a pretty good scan for all of those. But we understand your concerns and we hear you.
Well, and right there, right now, on the corner of Sterling and New York, there is no place to park. They've taken half the block away because there's a huge development that's coming there. So half the street is, and you can't even park on half this block.
Yeah.
I'll certainly take a second look, but definitely that station on Sterling at New York, we did have to shift because of that construction once we did a field evaluation. So we can certainly take a second look if there's options on St. John's.
Great, thank you. I just have to address a few comments in the chat that seem to presume that City Bike is something for the economically empowered and economically privileged. It is not. It is a bicycle. It is for people who cannot or do not prefer to have cars, who choose to make a lifestyle choice, whether they have to by force of economics or whether they choose to out of the goodness of their being, what have you, to not have a car in New York City. Many of your friends and neighbors who have lived here as long as you do have made that choice and thrive in this city and survive in this city and do very well in this city without having a car. So it is not a question of newcomer versus old timer. It is not a question of a rich person versus a poor person. In fact, it cuts the other way. Bikes are for people who may be at the lower end of the economic scale, almost certainly than people who have cars. It's economic fact. So that argument holds no water for me. The second argument that I'm seeing
It
in the
holds
chat
no
is that
water
this
for
is
you.
about
It holds no water for you because you're looking at it from that point of view. I have a bicycle, I walk, and I have a car. Economically, you can go out and buy a bicycle for $100 that has been placed together. You don't need a corporation to come and decide that they're going to help gentrify a community. And this is what's happening. You and I both know these things because we've had these conversations. But now
and
you're
we've
spouting
disagreed
a
for
party
many
line.
years about this, Mr. Atkins. Yes, we've had some.
You and I have disagreed on several things, and then you've only come back and had to say you were right, Mr. Atkins. I don't want to wait until all of the people who I'm thinking of are displaced, and then you come and tell me you were right, Mr. Atkins. If I'm going to be the only
If they're
person
going to
who's
be
going to appeal
displaced,
this,
they're not going to be ridden out of town on a city bike. It's not going to be the trigger.
no, it's going to be even worse than that. Probably a roller skate.
Are there any other questions for our presenters?
Hey, Rob, my hand's been up for a little bit. It's Sharon Wedderburn.
Sorry, Sharon, just not seeing the hands tonight. Go right ahead.
No worries. So my question comes because we're not seeing any city bike station locations near the Nostrand Avenue subway, near the Utica Avenue subway. Eastern Parkway is the dividing line. Community board. So we can have a discussion about balancing.
Sorry, we lost you for a moment.
Sorry, someone, well, I'm sorry, I'm on my phone and someone tried to call me. So what I'm saying is that I'm concerned about no sighting of city bike stations near subway stops, and to hear that it's going to be part of the Board 9 sighting, right? And just thinking about Utica Avenue just makes me shake my head anyway. But why is it that we don't have that information about possible sighting when it can so adversely affect a shared asset, meaning the subway stations along Eastern Parkway? Because certainly we're talking about looking at re-sightings and revisiting specific sites that are called out, but we have no opportunity for input for something like that at this moment.
Okay, we're in the middle of site selection for Community Board 9, and I mean, that'll be available in the same fashion that it is now. After we present our draft plan to them sometime this summer, then it's publicly available, and we'd be looking for feedback on that as well.
So does that mean that the installation of the City Bikes and Community Board 8 will be delayed until that happens? Or can you possibly identify the sites in Community Board 9 that are located near the shared subway stops in Community Board 8 for consideration at this moment?
Agree with Sharon. I think that's critical.
I understand like the balance of wanting to look at that network, and that these community board lines can sometimes really impact the way that the network seems to you. So we can certainly share CB9's plans once we get them, to make sure that you also have some input on that border as well.
So let me be clear. It's not how it feels. It is the impact upon Community Board 8 not having this information. It is an impact, not a feeling.
We will share it as soon as it's available.
So that goes back to part of my question. Therefore, will the implementation of the city bike sites in Community Board 8 be delayed, or conversely, can the sites that are going to be cited in Community Board 9 for our shared resource of the subway station be accelerated so that it can be implemented at the same time?
So we will expand into CB9 once we complete, and we don't necessarily have to completely fill out CB8 before we start working into CB9. We're going to be working in geographic sections, so we could, for instance, if we're working along Eastern Parkway, we're certainly not going to only install in CB8 and not 9 when it makes a little bit more sense to kind of, pepper it along that. So I think the installations are going to happen over several months. We're certainly not going to install an 8 and then wait for a year and come back. These will all happen, over several months later this year.
So can I just share with you how it actually works within the community, right? So if you look at the subway stops, you have entrances and exits in Community Board 8 and Community Board 9 for the shared resource. So what I'm actually asking, since I need to make it clearer, is that we need to know the sightings for the city bikes that are going to be located by subway stations, or we can have no implementation until both are identified along the Eastern Parkway corridor.
So once we present to CB9, we will certainly share that information with you. We're not trying to withhold information, but we certainly wouldn't come to CB8 and present, information for a separate board.
So let me ask this question.
To kind of continue that conversation once
let
we
me
present
ask
to
this
CB9.
question. Do you have no idea of where the siting is going to be for city bikes located near the subway stations as at this time? Is that what you're telling us?
We're working with the Borough Commissioner's Office on those locations. They are not public yet, and once they become public, we will happily share them with you.
Do locations exist adjacent
Some locations in theory exist, but we're still working with our contractors. So, going out and doing some final surveys, making sure we have all of the details right.
I will, Sharon, I hear I hear your frustration, and I'm just going to have to share it and say, look, they'd be stupid to not put city bike stations near those subways, and I don't think they're stupid. So I don't think we're going to get a straight answer.
And I'm going to add something else. This whole car bike parking space. When you're circling and you live on Lincoln Place and Union Street, or Lincoln or President Street and St. John's or Sterling, you're going to be circling around Eastern Parkway to find a space in desperate times. It really makes a difference. to the residents that are supposedly going to be able to utilize the city banks and those of us that have cars.
Any other
So
questions? Sorry,
I
go ahead.
haven't. Just another statement. I know what's done is done for this presentation, but in the future, could DOT try to scope with their, contractor to at least provide the locations that are within like a block or two in the adjacent CB, just so that you get the picture of like
for this presentation.
filling in those gaps?
Or, I mean, we can work with the BC's office and talk with them about how they feel about presenting, information from one board prior to another. I think that's part of the reason that we're not showing that is because we haven't like formally talked through it with CB 9, but I can appreciate how much it impacts folks in CB 8 as well.
And I'm sure when you present to CB9, since we got first, they'll get the benefit of seeing our presentation too. So there you are. Yet again, they eat our lunch. Any other questions for our presenters?
Just one thing, Officer Sharabi here. David, can you please email me, not in regards to the city bikes, in regards to the traffic pattern on Buffalo and Eastern, can you please email me the that detailed information to my email address that I provided in the chat?
You're looking for David Chung? I don't think he's on anymore.
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
I think
okay.
he's left,
Thank
but
you.
other people from DOT will reach out to them and make sure.
Once I get it, officer, this is Mark Third, and I'll forward it over to the 77 precinct. And I have
put my email.
I have your email also, and I'll send it to you.
Thank you so much, Mark. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Mark. All right. Thank you.
Those are all the questions. I just want to say that so now we're collecting feedback on this draft plan map. It's posted online and we can send it to you as well. So we generally like to collect feedback in about a month after this meeting. So please take it back, look it over. And if there are any serious operational concerns with any of these sites, please put it in writing, send it to us, and we can take a look at it. Yeah, so hope to be hearing from y'all soon.
We'll do the same thing we're doing with the other proposal. We'll take a month, we'll absorb, we'll circulate this among the membership, we'll collect feedback, and we'll give you what criticism we can. Constructive. Miss Jordan, if you could mute yourself. Miss Jordan, I think you're unmuted. Thank you. All right.
All right, but thank you.
Thank you for your time, Sam and Lisa. The agenda. So thank you all for your patience. I know this meeting has gone about an hour and a half, and I like short meetings. So, but these were two very crucial topics to our work. So let's move on to a third. We're going to touch on goals. The committee got a memo from me. We tried, and the technology failed us to put a poll together for the members of the committee about what we want to tackle in our next board year. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it tonight, but just have a look at the second page of the memo. There are 12 thoughts, 3 in each of the 4 buckets of environmental issues, sanitation issues, street issues, and transit issues. They are by no means, set in stone. Please feel free to either email the whole listserv or me personally, whether you have a preference about something else that I may have missed that falls into one of those 4 buckets that we want to work on as a group next year, so starting in September, or whether there's something else that we should do that we missed entirely. Just feel free to have the conversation so that when we have our May meeting, one of our pieces of business will be a list of topics that we want to break into subcommittees and deal with next year. I think, as I said in the memo, our subcommittees have done some great work so far this year. We've had some good, we've sent some letters, we've sponsored some action, we've had the RAD academies, we've had a lot of good things going on. So we want to keep that going. I think it's a good model. If we want to do something differently for the next board year, let me know, let Mark know, and we'll have a talk over the summer about how we want to reconfigure the committee. But for right now, we're thinking that it's a good model. I'm thinking it's a good model that we go out there and we find the areas of concern that are great for our community, and we try to work on them. And again, I play small ball. I want to get something incremental done for our community, concrete, that's demonstrable, that I can point to and say, we put that stop sign in, we put that curb cut in, we, Community Board 8, cleaned out that catch basin. We wanted things to happen that improved life in this district for everyone. We exterminated all those rats. I'd like to say that, but I don't think I can quite say that yet. So again, just the committee, please review the memo, especially the second page, and we'll talk about it offline. And by our May meeting, we'll have something to vote on. Any questions on that? All right, then we're two more items. One is, are there any subcommittee reports? And the second will be opening the floor up for new business. And I know there's a few people who've already texted me offline to ask for opportunity to speak for new business. Do any of the subcommittees have a report to make?
Rules of the Road does.
Mr. Crassus, fire away.
Okay, well, I'll be quick. I think we had 4 or 5 items. We discussed. I think maybe one part of this is a broader committee discussion that maybe could be put on for May. It relates. Is about the agenda itself and how the agenda is developed for these meetings. For example, and what kind of notice is provided. I think we were generated here by the idea of whether DOT would be attending the meetings tonight. I think it would be helpful if the agendas would, maybe come earlier and let us know if DOT is coming. The second item here was to, and this may also relate to the May discussion, is request DOT attend the committee to discuss the following, and there were some specific safety issues. Among them was actually Eastern Parkway at Lincoln Terrace, so that's good. We can put a check mark there. And then I think Rogers' speed camera before the school block is another note. And then there was an accident at Nostrand and St. John's. And maybe some of the other the subcommittee members can weigh in here if they like. And so safety issues, and the other one definitely was open streets and having discussion in the committee generally about the open streets, how they're implemented, where they're located, including the ones that are underway now. Remember at the last committee meeting, we showed you 2 spreadsheets that we developed, one with quality of life and safety issues, and we've been updating that. The second is the public realm spreadsheet. And actually, I think what we could do with help with is that spreadsheet. Maybe if the co-chairs of the committee could help us fill that in, that would be great to get a start. And then finally, no, there's two more things here. So just a news update that, and this is something that's unfolding in several committees in the community board. It's a discussion about a comprehensive plan for the Atlantic Avenue vicinity. This is just as a reminder, there are 2 individual applications on Atlantic Avenue for ULURP applications that went through the land use committee. And the council member, in fact, was encouraged by the community board generally, and by some passion in the community generally as well, to push for a comprehensive plan. So that, which means it's instead of just approving an individual application or one building, there would be looking at the whole sector. And seeing what needs to be done in terms of transportation, rapid transit, open space. Many of the issues that this committee has been talking about and circling around fit into that. And this would be a multi-year process that might be getting started as early as May, which is within weeks. So it's happening, it will probably happen very quickly. And so the community board should be aware of this, and this relates to everything that's being discussed. It's about the community's priorities, what should be done to accommodate development, especially, and what the community's needs are. But it also relates to what we had been discussing in the past, which was a request to the Transportation Alternatives to come to the Atlantic Avenue, to come to this committee to give a presentation on their proposal for Atlantic Avenue. Finally, I think we met. There were actually 4 of the 7 people who have kind of signed up for this Rules of the Road subcommittee. It would be great just if everybody who's we'd like to open it up more, because we seem to be fitting in a meeting in between these committee meetings, and so it'd be great to have more participation actually, so we don't have to just stick with the 7 people that we started with. We can actually, if anyone else wants to join in, they should feel free. So we can share that once we have a meeting time for the next one. We can share the link. Hopefully, give everyone about may not be a week's notice, but something like that. We do a dual poll if you want to for scheduling. So if you have an interest, you're interested, just let us know now. Maybe post it into the community board, the Google group, and then we'll just make sure that you're included in the doodle poll as we're setting up a time. Okay. That's my point. Does anyone else from the Rules of the Road have anything to say? Sorry.
I think you covered it all, Peter.
Thank you for letting us know. Any other committees have a report? Then to just respond fulsomely to that, especially item number 1, agenda development. If you guys want something on the agenda, email the board office, email me, email Mark, and we have a very open policy about things that get on the agenda. My one rule is I don't like voting on something the same meeting that it's presented on. I feel that's, we're not the SLA committee, we're not the land use committee. We have the luxury of deliberation because things usually aren't that timely. So if we're going to have a presentation or discuss an issue, I want a cooling off period before we vote on it. But otherwise, if there's something you want to bring to us in a presentation from an organization like TA, very welcome. So if that hadn't been said, now it's been said. So please just to use that open door. But yeah, the Atlantic Avenue question is something I think we as a committee should be on. And if I wasn't, that was one that I wanted to put on my list, and I didn't. I left it off. So yeah. I definitely think that's something that we as a committee should be dealing with in the 2022-2023 situation in the board year next year. So thank you for those items. As far as the specific safety items, do you want to circulate those to the full group by email? And we can maybe take some action on them next month. The rider speed camera, anything you were thinking about with Nostrand and St. John's, and anything your group is thinking about with open streets and any other those other issues. So we can again elevate it from the subcommittee to the full committee, and that's the point of the subcommittee. All good? Okay, I'm gonna turn to new business now, and there are a few things in the chat. I just want to see if Miss Howard is still here. Deborah Howard.
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Howard. Please proceed. You asked to be on the agenda.
So I realize that this is an issue that has probably come up before and been dealt with, but I don't think it's been dealt with post-COVID. And that is the return of alternate side parking to 4 days a week from the 2 days a week. In my view, the streets they were no cleaner when they were cleaned 4 times a week. I think we could be better served with having trash cans returned to corners. And since COVID, there's more cars, less parking spaces. There was just a huge discussion about losing parking spaces to City Bike. From an environmental standpoint, moving your car 4 times a week instead of twice, requires owners to circle blocks, sometimes for as much as 30 to 40 minutes. When people double park because, they're waiting for the the time to change, a lot of people leave their engines running to keep the heat or the AC on. I understand that part of the motive behind this might be revenue, and I think that that should be dealt with, a different way. Moreover, I don't think they ever came 4 times a week. I don't even know if they come twice a week now. And it just seems, what is so different about us than, say, areas in Park Slope where people move their car only once a week. So I was hoping that this might be something that the committee could bring up to the full board.
Yeah, this is something that pre-pandemic we did address. We had a district-wide town hall about it, and narrowly the proposal to roll back alternate side from 4 days to 2 days lost. So that was, I want to say, 5 or 6 years ago. We are only eligible for consideration. Let me talk about this in 2 ways. One is the way the system works, and then I'll talk about it the way perhaps the system should work. The way the system works is a community district such as CB8 is eligible for a reduction in ASP if their district scorecard, which is an arbitrary measure of the cleanliness or filthiness of the sidewalks and streets of the district, is above, I think it's 90% for a certain period consecutively. We were in that moment at that time 5 or 6 years ago where we were eligible, and the board voted it down. We have since dipped on the scorecard, and we are no longer eligible for consideration of reduction. So until our scorecard gets back up consistently above 90, this is not a conversation the Department of Sanitation will have with us. That's the nutshell about the way things are. Now, you bring up a lot of good points about the way things should be. First and foremost is the inducement of movement that alternate side parking brings about. It makes people get in their cars and drive when they may not otherwise. Now, if they're not going to do so otherwise, why do they have a car in the city at all? I don't know. But there are imperfections to the system that are undeniable. And if we can build a better mousetrap for alternate side cleaning that gets our streets cleaner and induces less driving, I'm all for it. And there's lots of notions out there, and I'd encourage you to go explore them. And perhaps this is one of the items that this committee wants to tackle next year. It's certainly one of the ones that made my list of 12. So I'm sorry to say, in the way the system works now, we're not eligible to even push for a change. Even more frustratingly, DOS will only consider a district-wide change. So let's say even if Weeksville had a 90% or higher scorecard and Prospect Heights was dogging it in the 70s, they won't change the ASP for Weeksville. We all sink or swim together. So,
which is really ironic, because if the sweepers don't come, they're in a sense making us responsible for their failure to come. And frankly, I don't even think that does much. I watch them go down the street.
It creates more dust than it cleans.
Yeah.
There's no doubt in my mind. But we're not in that position, unfortunately. But if we can advocate for systemic change, is probably our better bet for tangible results.
Yeah. So if you have any suggestions for me in terms of dealing with the Department of Sanitation, I'd appreciate it. I just don't know who to reach out to.
Your council member, and say that ASP is broken.
Got it. Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. Thanks for the time.
Pleasure. I suddenly see your hand for Ms. Gray. Do you have a question or a new business item?
I have questions about the street cleaning. I think I have relatives who live in Old Mill Basin. There's no street cleaning. They don't have to move their cars. We need to talk to them over there and find out how that was accomplished, because we can only learn about that.
Well,
Number two,
yeah.
we also
the answer to that is density. We are far denser than Mill Basin, and that's why we have alternate side and they don't.
Old Mill Basin, we are far, the Old Mill Basin. Okay. Number two, what is the 90%? We need an explanation on how to get to 90%, because right now you're sharing this. The first time I'm hearing about it, and I never heard of these scorings before. So I'm glad to hear it, but they need to give us a comprehensive way with details and how we can accomplish that 90%. Because just as Deborah was just saying, the streets are no more dirty than they were pre-COVID. When that truck comes by, the dust is crazy. So we need to really, really sit down and go to sanitation and just tell them, show me. It's like, you said, show me the money. Show me what the story really is. And we need to get that part done. And that's extremely important. The next thing, I posted a link in the chat about the Atlantic Avenue situation with the proposed development and our council person. It's an article that came out in The Real Deal. And I suggest that you open it and take a look at it. And I had spoken before about clogging of the streets because of the closing of some streets. We definitely need to visit that. And the other thing I'm going to talk about is the dog poop. The dog poop has become ridiculous. Okay, sidewalks, parapets. There's a lady who comes around here on the hill, and she looks around to see who is looking, and then she runs with the dog. They know what they're doing. And I see Manhattan is addressing the same thing right now. And we need to have a policy and start really ticketing people. Because that's ridiculous. That's nasty. And as someone said in the chat, the rats are eating it. So that's more disease being spread. Ugh.
Yeah, I did see on the news the other day that there is a new ad campaign about pick up your poop. And I can't believe we're back here, 40 years later, still talking about it. It should be one of the basic necessities for owning a dog. You're absolutely right that the rat association with dogs and it's food basically. So yeah, the cleaner we can keep our streets, the better. But I want to return to your middle point. You mentioned open streets. Does anyone else want to speak on open streets? Any other comments?
Well, last from my hat from Community Board 8 Public Safety Chairperson, we had our meeting last night, and there was several voices concerned about safety in reference to traffic and all the congestion that's happening, and drivers being angry of whatever they have with all the traffic that's going on, and all the congestion, and it's making the situation hazardous for the outlining areas from those open street, not open street, but it's really open corridors that we have going north and south. So that was a topic that was discussed for more than an hour at the meeting last night, and some of the people are on the call now that was on the call last night, and I advised them to attend this meeting and voice their concerns.
Sure.
Because
I just want to get them on the record for the meeting. So yeah, absolutely.
Rob, I'm just going to jump in because I know you can't see hands, and I just wanted to echo the congestion that's being caused to the eastern part of the district. Traffic congestion because of the inaccessibility of Vanderbilt Avenue and Underhill Avenue. There's no north-south egress to Eastern Parkway. As soon as Franklin Avenue has been reduced to a single lane, so that's not an option. You just have to go too far, and the amount of traffic that you encounter on Atlantic Avenue just makes you want to stop the car and cry.
That's Atlantic and the north-south avenues. Thank you, Sharon. Any other comments?
Excuse me, Rob. Rob?
I hear two voices. I hear Mr. Atkins and somebody else.
I think that's Zima.
I'm going to give Ms. Tate
No,
Hall the
with Ms.
floor for a
Tate
moment.
Hall.
How are you, Audrey? Good evening.
I'm fine, thank you. I really, really wish that Underhill would be opened up. It's like I heard tonight, it's causing traffic congestion, and it's like crazy. Why would you close that street when you have Washington Avenue just a block away with buses and increasing cars? And then you have the outdoor restaurant sheds. It's like a time bomb, just waiting for something bad to happen. You know, it doesn't make any sense. I understood it being closed during the height of the pandemic to give people freedom walking around. I understand it. I used it. But now with things kind of like easing down, it's time to open back Underhill. It doesn't, it serves no purpose being closed. When I walk up there, one or two people are walking in the middle of the street. And for just one or two people, it doesn't make any sense. You have the school PS9 there. The buses now are doing these crazy routes. The buses now get out and move those street closure metals so they can, you know, make an easier route to get these children home to their families. You know, it just does not make any sense. So any way you can, you know, revisit that and get it open as soon as possible, it will be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tate Hall. Mr. Atkins.
Thank you for recognizing me. That was brought up earlier about the street sweeping. I put a comment in the chat, and one of the first things there was, why aren't the street sweepers using water? If they're using water, they'll pick up more dirt. If they pick up more dirt, then the street sweepers will have to go to their dumping area more often. That's undesirable, for that means they'll have to work twice as long. So they don't use it. Or the other thing is that they're saying that they're not able to keep a working fleet of equipment. And so because they have too many units that have broken down. And that's another reason why they're not using all of the vectors of the machines to do the street sweeping. But we now, if the streets are filthy, that's because trash is blown off the sidewalks. The sidewalks trash is coming from overflowing garbage cans. I pointed out in the committee for the past 2 years that there's no enforcement on the major commercial and secondary avenues that have mixed-use buildings. They don't have trash cans. So then the people are placing their trash out on the street, and then that is flowing and blowing away. Or they're placing their trash into the public receptacles, which is illegal, but they don't care. I've observed people walking a block from where they live to dump trash, and then the same thing occurs. The other things that happen, so that's a major failing, that they're not making mixed-use buildings print garbage cans that covers so that it's all these things are additive. All these things contribute to the decline of the health and the quality of life in the community. You're the person who's for us, but you selectively choose to do certain things, in my view. Now, that's pejorative, but you were the person who advocated to have Avenue or Washington Avenue. And then you championed closing the streets. That increased the quality of life for the people who live over without any thought for what would happen to the people on the other side of that divide, literally. And so now if the chickens have come home to roost. You can see exactly what's occurring because of that. So it's not my judgment. Goes in the meeting and says Franklin Avenue is like 42nd Street. And I mean, traffic is at a standstill. Or the fact that the area by PS 316, as the public constantly double parked, a very popular funeral home, which came before us for a street name change, a Catholic church, and then a block away from there, a residential treatment center, which used to be called CNR. I don't remember the whole new name. But when the traffic over there overflows, you are unable to move north or south on Washington Avenue. So the things are not contained in one particular issue, but all these things go to the general quality of life within the community. So you have traffic, the flow of traffic being occluded almost everywhere, particularly going south. Going north on Rogers Avenue, it's a speed trap. And I spoke to someone and they told me that, yes, they were guilty of not obeying the traffic laws and they would speed in the bus lane. And I said, but that may cause someone to be killed. A gentleman brought up in the safety meeting that on Washington Avenue, people do what I call jailbreak. They cannot move forward going north or south, let's say, and they will jump into the opposing lane and drive illegally for a block, maybe 2 blocks, until they can turn off or jump back into the direction they were originally going, risking life, loss of life and property for people in the community. All these things are occurring all around us right now.
Mr. Witherwax, may I say something, please? It's Tamika Gibbs.
Mr. Atkins, are you finished?
Yes, I am.
Yes, Ms. Gibbs, if Mr. Atkins is done.
Hey, Rob, after Tamika, I think we have someone on the line. Matt, who can we go to Matt after Tamika? He's on a call in from the phone.
All right, Ms. Gibbs, then Matt.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to thank, first of all, Mr. Witherwax for this committee. A lot of this is stemmed from, I'm sorry, I'm outside, from our public safety committee that we had last night, and a lot of us that were there last night are actually here this evening. Just a point of reference, the Underhill closure, I don't know, I know there's someone who's supposed to, they put the barricade to block Underhill, but no one's there to pick them back up after that time is gone. I myself, 2 weeks ago, coming from work, it was after the time and it was halfway in the middle of the street. I pulled over because it's like somebody who was trying to get up Underhill just like pushed it with their car. I got out of my vehicle, moved it to the side, out of the street, because now I think it was after 4 o'clock. I think it's up until 4, and it was still there in the middle of the street, impeding traffic. And it was on a Friday, so the street opposite, the street parallel to it was closed at this point because we know on the weekends the street is closed on Vanderbilt? Yeah, the Vanderbilt open streets is closed. So now we had Vanderbilt and Underhill closed. Someone needs to be whoever is responsible. Let's get away with it all together. In my opinion, as Ms. Tate-Hall suggested and other people, but as well, since it's there, can we please be timely with the fact of the time it needs to be moved? And everything else, I'm happy everybody else is here this evening. I'm just in a loud place, so I'm not going to keep long, but I am still here.
Thank you, Ms. Gibbs. Thank you very much. Mark, if Matt is here.
Hey, Matt, can you unmute yourself? Matt, you still there? Oh. All right. I guess not. He's there, but
That's all right.
he's not unmuted himself.
It's okay. Are there any further questions on any other topics for tonight? I want to stress that, the chair and the co-chair hear everyone. Everyone should feel heard at the meeting. That's why we have these meetings. Yes, we have our own opinions, but I like to think that everyone would agree that we run this committee fairly. And, I would like to think that people would agree that after, 10 plus years of working together, we can agree that we are all coming at this from a point of good faith. And I see someone shaking his head, which makes me feel that someone is not coming at this from a place of good faith. So I'm sorry about that. And that's the way we'll have to end it. So without any further business for this evening, I encourage the members to respond to the email with the memo about business for next board year, how you'd like this to run. Mr. Crash has made an excellent point about agenda development. I want it to come from the subcommittees up. I don't want it to be top down. So I want to make sure that's something that's clear. And tell us what you want to do next year, right? Tell us what projects we want to work on where we, as a group, as a community who love where we live, can advance the agenda to keep this a wonderful place to live and improve it for everyone who lives here, chooses to live here, wants to live here. That's the goal, right? It's a community board. So with that, and if no one else has anything further to say, I'm going to ask for a motion for, what's the word? Tired.
Adjourn. Adjourn the meeting.
Adjourn. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Gibbs.
You're
motion
welcome.
to adjourn.
I make a motion.
I'll presume you made it too. So
yes, I made that motion.
Thank you very much. Then thank everyone for an excellent meeting, and we'll adjourn. We'll resume in May. Thank you very much.
Good night.
Thank you, officer, for joining the meeting.
Yes, thank you very much for staying.
No problem. Stay safe, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You too.